It was a shambles, but it was clear that it was intended to be from the moment that the president decided to plan this ill-advised event. He chose a motion that was outrageous in its phrasing. It wasn't really designed to have a fair and honest debate about what's going on in Israel. And he then chose speakers on the side against Israel who were as inflammatory and aggressive as he possibly could, and also tried to hijack our side of the debate by constantly miscommunicating or telling us porkies, let's say, about who was invited on our side and who wasn't. It's a miracle that we managed to pull together, actually, a fantastic team, and I was very proud of the speeches that we would give from the position of expertise and experience that we had. But the audience there was also handpicked by the president. They had made it members only for apparently security reasons. Those security reasons appeared to be to decrease our security. We were heckled, sworn at in English and in Arabic. All of our speeches were disrupted. We had to provide our own security detail to keep ourselves safe. The union made a very small contribution to that. Nothing about how this event was organised was correct or proper, and I would say that the president of the Oxford Union brought that august institution into enormous disrepute with his behaviour there. But more importantly, Jewish students told me that they felt afraid to attend the event. They weren't able to get in if they wanted to, and they were scared of the environment and the atmosphere in there. So all round, this was a shameful event, and definitely somebody should be held accountable for it.
I mean, some of the things that you're hearing reported here, and this I find absolutely horrific. Apparently, when asked whether or not this is the audience, the participants, if they would have reported Hamas's plans to authorities in order to prevent the October the 7th massacre, 75% voted that they would not have done that. Essentially would be in tacit agreement that the most disgusting, barbaric, murderous, genocidal, to use the term I'd say correctly, acts by a vile, barbaric organisation are actually fine, because they've become so brainwashed that Israel is a terrorist state, that Israel is an evil country. This is a premier seat of learning in the United Kingdom. These are supposed to be our leaders of the future. This is the finishing school of the international community for people who will go on and hold the most prestige and powerful positions. How come so many of them seem to have such a warped mindset when it comes to Israel and the reality of geopolitics in the Middle East?
That's right, and it wasn't an abstract or academic question, by the way, because the person that asked them that was my colleague Mossab Hassan Youssef, who, for those who don't know, is the son of one of the founders of Hamas. He actually, from that position, decided to inform on Hamas to Israel and saved probably thousands of people's lives by informing Israel of impending suicide bombings for 10 years as a double agent. So when we brought him on our team, we knew that he would be able to speak from a position of unique experience to the entire audience there and internationally, somebody that understands this conflict from not just both sides, but deep within both sides. So he then, after he explained that that's what he'd done, with his own life at great risk to himself, asked the audience there this arbitrary question for them, no risk, no jeopardy, would they have informed if they knew something about the 7th of October? And I would say that by the show of hands that he requested, 75% is a sort of optimistic evaluation. Very few people put up their hands. It was very telling that those people in that room couldn't even bring themselves to raise a hand, never mind to actually do something to save lives themselves. And I agree with you that the fact that that room had been packed by such haters doesn't necessarily reflect the mood of students at Oxford in general, but it does show that at least 300-400 people that they'd chosen to be in that room in order to try to intimidate us, and it turns out Jewish students in Oxford, wouldn't have done so. And it wasn't surprising, because the atmosphere in that room was just shocking. The tension was thick. People were swearing at us in Arabic, in English throughout. It was clear they weren't there for debate or for discussion. They weren't there to hear from people like Mossab or myself. They were simply there to try and cause as much trouble as they could and show that they had control over that organisation, that they had infiltrated it and taken it over. And as he said in a post on X the next day, through asking that question and their lack of response, he concluded that the Oxford Union had been taken over by terrorist sympathisers. I think it's very hard to think of it any other way, actually.
I mean, academic institutions, universities have always had a bent towards sort of left-wing luxury ideologies and the CND and so forth. You know, it's sort of kind of what students do and some academics do, where they wear their knitted jumpers and they, you know, want to beat down on the hierarchy and all the rest of it. But this isn't anything sort of brand new when it comes to the world of academia. But are you worried about what's going on now? That we know that hostile regimes and we know that terrorist organisations are using more sophisticated way to build networks, to infiltrate things like our seats of learning, to start to move the mindset of a particular population using lawfare, using institutions such as the UN, using NGOs and charities, using lobbying. When you see something like this at the Oxford Union, which is a famed organisation, and you're beginning to see how they're loading an audience and allowing really, you know, horrific attitudes to prevail, should we be worried, or is this just something that has happened in academic institutions since they were invented?
Well, I don't think there is anything particularly left-wing or liberal or student-like about supporting terrorism and the slaughter of children and civilians. So I'm not sure I would say that this was automatically understandable, even at a university. Now, I don't want to catastrophise things either. At the same time, I recognise that the vast majority of students at Oxford were not in that room. And many who were on the right side of this were unable to get into that room because they appeared to be hand-selected not to be there. But I will say that it is distressing, yes, absolutely. And I went there, as I said in my speech, to appeal to people's sense of reason and to hope that there would be a fair debate where people could hear opinions that they maybe didn't agree with in order to challenge their own thoughts and preconceptions and perhaps to broaden their knowledge. But that really wasn't what happened in there. Instead, it was a motion designed to appeal to their prejudice, not to their reason or intelligence. And that prejudice is a result of what you just described, which is because there's been this sort of takeover and infiltration of NGOs and international bodies like the UN by those people who don't have respect for the truth or indeed for humanity, but instead for bashing Israel and Jews and spreading these slanders and calumnies. It means that student audiences who maybe aren't that well informed, why should they be? They're still students, they're still learning, but they are primed to believe the very worst, most evil blood libels and slanders about Jews, the Jewish state, Israel. And so rather than evaluating the facts, they're willing to take everything at face value. They've been told Israel bad, Israelis evil, Jews like killing children, all those sorts of things, which unfortunately we've heard throughout our history as a Jewish people. And so then when the words genocide and apartheid are thrown at them, rather than examine the true meaning of those words legally, ethically, morally, historically, and assessing the facts alongside them, they just hear it and they just say, well, yes, it feels right because we've been told by previous slurs that that's exactly how Israel behaves. But none of that is based on truth or facts or debate, and they weren't open to hearing any of that from any of the speakers on our side. And that's what's utterly depressing and most troubling about what happened on Thursday night.
Yeah, I find it depressing and troubling indeed. Jonathan Sagadotti, thank you ever so much. These are supposed to be some of the most astute, analytical, academic minds. This is Oxford University.